After years of having it high on my bucket list, I finally managed to get on El Toro, a Six Flags Great Adventure located in Jackson Township, New Jersey. El Toro stands as the tallest wooden coaster in North America, boasting one of the most impressive looking structures that I've ever seen. It is one of 4 Intamin prefabricated wooden coasters around the world and is widely considered to be the most extreme of the group. In this video, I'll discuss my experience with El Toro along with listing its pros and cons. I'll end by showing you where the coaster inevitably falls in my rankings and answering the question, is El Toro the best wooden roller coaster ever built? Over the course of 2 days, I got 21 total rides on El Toro and sat in all sorts of different seats around the train, getting an interesting range of different experiences. My first 5 rides came in the afternoon, then I got 9 night rides, and finally 7 more on the following morning. Through this, I found that this is a coaster where your experience can heavily differ based on the seat you sit in, the time of day you ride, and how full the train is. The best rides I got were my night rides in rows 17 and 18, aka the back and second to back rows, with the train being completely full. I found that row 17 was the much smoother experience between the two, and row 18, while a bit rougher, was actually a bit more intense and thrilling. Row 17 was good no matter when I rode it, but with 18 I noticed that it got pretty rough when the trains were emptier. Of course, with the back rows, you get that feeling of being pulled over the coaster's major airtime moments, such as the first drop, the 2 camelbacks, and the rolling Thunderhill. However, if you ride in the front, you'll get the feeling of being pushed into the airtime rather than being pulled through. I know that difference may be hard to visualize and it's a bit hard to fully describe, so you just have to experience it yourself to know what I'm talking about. Either way, while I do prefer the back rows, you still get some very good and strong airtime whether you're in the back or front. I found that especially on the camelbacks you'll get amazing sustained airtime no matter where you're sitting on the train. But when it comes to the rolling Thunderhill, it didn't really hit for me during my middle row rides. Specifically, this applies to cars 2, 3, and 4 on the train, or rows 4 through 12. So when you ride El Toro, I would recommend riding in cars 1, 5, or 6 for the best experience. With this being a wooden coaster, the seats directly above the wheels can get quite rough at times, making the ride not as enjoyable for most people. Now, while I was there, some locals told me that it's currently running the best that it has in years, which is largely due to a major retracking operation that's been underway and will continue over the next couple of years, so hopefully this means it'll keep getting better and better. I never found my rides to be overwhelmingly rough regardless, but if you want the smoothest ride possible, I recommend riding in the second row of the cars, which includes rows 2, 5, 8, 11, 14, and 17. These rows do not sit atop the train's wheels and thus don't feel the bumps in the track as strongly as other rows might. Alright, now I'll get into the many pros and some cons that I found with El Toro. The first good thing that you have to mention about this coaster is of course that ridiculous first drop. I had heard the stories about how great it was, and yet it still managed to surprise me. On my first ride in row 17, we got pulled over the edge, and I was like, oh cool, that's nice, expecting it to start bottoming out. Then out of nowhere, it just hits another gear and even further tosses you out of the train before actually bottoming out. It actually took me a while to process the whole thing, and was absolutely ridiculous. It's absolutely one of the best first drops I've ever experienced, and the only drops I could see contending with it are the B&M Gigas, Orion, and Fury 325 that I've ridden. Another pro occurs right before that first drop, and that's the nice little scenic turnaround at the top of the lift hill. I imagine this was even cooler when King Dakar was still standing, but even without it, you still get a good view of that plot of land and the Wild Safari Park. Then, once you complete the turnaround, you get a beautiful view of the whole park, which just looks massive from that vantage point. I love it when a coaster can give you a good view on the lift, and from my experience, few do it as well as El Toro. My first con will reiterate what I've already said in that this ride can be rough at times. Particularly in the morning with an empty train, it banged me around a bit, causing some pain. Of course, if you sit in the right seats, it doesn't really feel rough, but it is a bit unfortunate when you have to be careful about which row you ride in. Even though it is a bit rough, it isn't overwhelming, and like I said, Six Flags does have a major retracking project underway, so we will likely see the coaster get much smoother over the next couple of years. My third pro is that the restraints on El Toro are very comfortable. Even being on the bigger side, the lap bars were quite comfortable for me and were never painful, even on the rides where I got a bit stapled. If you do get stapled, it'll certainly take away from the airtime, but it'll still be a comfortable ride. I'd say this is easily like a top 5 favorite restraint of mine, and the only restraint from Intamin specifically that I'd say is better is of course the T-bar found on the original Top Thrill Dragster and Millennium Force. The fourth pro here is that especially when you don't get stapled, this coaster has some of the best and strongest airtime moments on any coaster out there. I jokingly called this a wooden sky rush at one point, and I honestly don't think that's a ridiculous comparison. The amount of sustained ejector airtime you get from the first drop, 2 camelbacks, and Rolling Thunderhill is ridiculous, and there are few coasters with a collection of airtime moments as good as those. It is ridiculous how well the hills are profiled to give you the absolute maximum amount of airtime as possible. Unfortunately, the Skyrush comparison also means that although El Toro has some amazing airtime moments, it also has a small quantity of them, which is my second con for the ride. I kind of came off feeling like although what it does have is great, the coaster could have used 1 or 2 more good airtime moments to really cap it off. This is definitely just a nitpick on my end, but I just thought it could have used one last thing to elevate it a bit more. Pro number 5 is the variety offered in the different sections of the coasters. You start out with those amazing camelbacks, of course, but then you get the turnaround segment that crushes you into your seat with those positive Gs. After another top tier airtime moment on the Rolling Thunderhill, you enter the finale consisted of a series of switchback turns that are very comparable to that on some of Intamin's steel coasters like Maverick and Cheetah Hunt. The coaster has a good mix of forces with all those different elements, making it a very well-rounded attraction. Unfortunately, among those great elements are some very noticeable dead spots. These are spots I found to be kind of boring and forceless even at the times of day that El Toro was running at its best. After the first turnaround, you enter a series of what I assume are supposed to be a couple of floater hills, and for me, they were just really boring and didn't give much airtime at all. It was something I noticed more the more rides I got on it. The other dead spot is those last few off-axis hills after the series of switchbacks, which I just found to be pretty pointless. They just seemed like filler track to bridge the gap between the previous section and the brake run. The existence of these weak moments did hurt the experience for me a bit, but of course, it does have plenty of other amazing moments to make up for it. I was able to get so many rides throughout my essentially day-long visit, largely in part due to the amazing operations that were happening at El Toro. The crew was doing an amazing job dispatching trains about as fast as they possibly could, often rolling one train out of the station before the other one was able to stack on the brake run. At one point, I heard them say that they dispatched 33 trains in an operating hour, which is very close to the theoretical capacity of 36 trains in an hour, if I'm remembering that number correctly. The 36 trains an hour figure is due to the amount of time the lift cable takes to return to the bottom of the lift after the previous train is disconnected from it. The last con I have for this video is something that may not even be a con for most, but is just more of a personal preference thing for me. I wouldn't be shocked if some disagreed with this take, but I didn't really find El Toro to have a lot of rapid-fire elements. Most of the moments on this coaster are distinct and drawn out, as opposed to maybe a series of smaller elements that all come at you in rapid succession and are great because of the combination of everything. I've noticed that I tend to prefer coasters with more rapid-fire elements to some degree, especially looking at some of the coasters I have in my top 10, such as Voyage, Iron Gwazi, Air Force One, Maverick, and Lightning Rod. Now, you might not prefer that like I do, and that's totally understandable, but for me, that's just the type of experience I tend to prefer. And finally, the last point I have to make about El Toro is my 7th pro, which is the amazing night ride that you can experience on it. I don't think I've ever experienced a bad night ride, and this one was no exception. You get an amazing view of the park with all of its lights as you go through the turnaround at the top of the lift hill, and then get a lot of really dark sections of ride throughout the layout, especially during that Twister section finale. I got to marathon night rides on my first evening there on the last hour of the day, and it was just an absolutely next level experience, especially with the 9 rides we got during it. El Toro is overall an amazing roller coaster and certainly warrants the hype that it always gets. The airtime is very strong and the variety in forces is very well put together. And that brings us to the question, is El Toro the best wooden roller coaster in the world? In my opinion, no, not quite. I still think that the Voyage is far and away the best wooden roller coaster I've ever ridden because of its ridiculous length, pacing, and rapid-fire airtime moments. I also have not been outside of the US, so I'm sure there are some other contenders out there like T-Express in South Korea and Wood Coaster in Night Valley, China. It is definitely a top-of-the-line coaster, but unfortunately the experience didn't quite blow me away enough to make my top 10. So after thinking about it, I decided to slot it in at the number 13 spot above Skyrush and below Pantherian. This is my first time doing a more in-depth review of a roller coaster, so if you would like to see more reviews on coasters like this one, make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and comment below telling me which coasters you'd like to see me review. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.